Chris, are you on for an invitation to the offering? Perhaps I will just say that. Simple enough. Friends, we couldn't do it if we didn't do it together. This is a beautiful community, and every week we have to reconstitute ourselves and rededicate ourselves to it. It doesn't run on autopilot. It runs because we all agree to make it happen. Thank you for making it happen this week. And thank you for your offerings, your gifts, your tithes, your talent, and your treasure that make it possible to do this work in the week to come. Our closing hymn is Amazing Grace. Friends, go from this place assured. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, the communion of the Holy Spirit will be with you this day and forevermore. Go in peace. Serve the Lord. Thanks be to God. gonna head pretty much directly into our annual meeting. Hope you'll be able to stick around for a few minutes. I don't expect it to be a long meeting, but it will be one that's important about the life and future of our church, and we appreciate your time and your insight. I do, before we begin and before we I pass it over to our clerk, Leah Threat, for leadership on the program for our annual meeting, I do want to make sure that we celebrate any birthdays, anniversaries, or big events, other points of celebration that have happened in our community this week. What do we got? Anybody celebrating a birthday or about to celebrate a birthday? You have to unmute, unfortunately, because I cannot see everybody to call on you. So how come we had all of these birthdays at the beginning of January and we have none at the end of January? Obviously, we will have a few more coming up in February, I'm guessing. Okay, friends. We have many other things to celebrate, but I will celebrate a few more of those in my remarks at the annual meeting. So let us proceed. Leah, are you there? There you are.
I'm here.
Okay, let's just do a little logistical work for just 1 second. Sue, are you? Yeah, you're still here. Could you highlight Leah? And Leah, I'm gonna make you a co-host so that you could also share your screen.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to share my screen in a second, but a couple of things you might want to take a moment to do right now is if you have another window in front of you, you can open up our annual report, which was emailed out over the week in PDF format. It's also available on the church's website. So if you'd like to follow along using that, you can have that in front of you. So we are going to start the meeting with an opening prayer from Reverend.
Thank you. Let's pray. God, through many dangers, toils, and snares, we have already come. What a year 2020 was. Only through your grace did we make it through, God. And because of your grace, we now celebrate the end of a year in which this community grew closer, both in our relationships with each other and our relationship to you. Help us now in this meeting reflect and celebrate on all that you have done for us, and to consider the ways in which we can be more closely led by you in the year to come. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I'm going to open with the call. The annual meeting of the Congregation and Corporation of Westminster Presbyterian Church, Albany, New York, has been called for Sunday, January 31st, 2021, following worship via virtual Zoom software for the purpose of 1, hearing reports by church staff, committee, and boards, 2, hearing accounts of the church finances, 3, electing the nominating committee for 2021, 4, reviewing and approving the terms of call for Reverend Kirk Davidoff, and 5, hearing informational items which the pastor in the session may wish to bring before the corporation. I promise that it's not going to be as long as it just sounded. So we're going to start by going through the annual report, and we usually let Reverend Kirk Davidoff lead with highlights she wants to share from that, and then we will have some financial reporting from that report.
Well, I thank you, Madam Clerk. I hope you all will get a chance to read and ponder the annual report that was attached and emailed. Please note we are doing our best to go virtual and paper-free, but we would be more than happy to send you a printed copy of that report if that would be helpful to you. In that report, you will hear a little bit about what the year was like for me, but I want to just offer a few short reflections now. I was thinking about a conversation I had recently with another pastor, well, not name, but she was telling me about how much her church is struggling right now. And she said, well, let's just put it this way. If we were a football team, we do not have a very deep bench. That really struck me, because I went home after that conversation and thought about just how deep our bench is. How deep our bench is here at Westminster. Not to be braggy, just to be grateful, right? I mean, think about it. If we need the sanctuary to get wired for remote control cameras so that we can live stream our service, well, it turns out there are people who can exactly do just that. If we need to organize a prayer group, there are people who can do exactly that. If we need to respond to racial injustice, well, it turns out in this community, there are people who can write a powerful call to action. There are people who can organize a racial justice vigil. There are people who will show up every single week at that vigil. There are people who know how to produce an enormous banner for that vigil. And there are even people who can figure out how to prop up that banner on 2 broomsticks and some screws. We have a deep bench. If we realize that we need to have Sunday school online, there are people who can apply for grants to fund computers. There are people who can refurbish donated computers. There are people who can figure out which families need computers. There are people who will sit next to kids to get their computers set up on Sunday morning and to make sure they participate in Sunday school. There are people who will teach, and there are people who will support those teachers. It takes a deep, deep bench to have an online Sunday school. But it doesn't end there, right? If we need to renegotiate our copier lease agreement, it turns out there are people who can do exactly that. If we need to figure out how to abide by New York's sick leave policy, it turns out there are people who can help us do exactly that. If we need to come together to pray before the inauguration, there are people who can envision that service. There are people who can join in and pray from their hearts at that service. And there are even people who can pull the rope to ring our heavy bell. It takes a deep bench to pull something like that off. But it doesn't end there. If we need to cook an African takeout dinner for 60 people, it turns out there are people who can do exactly that. If we need to renegotiate our agreement with a school in Liberia, it turns out there are people who can do exactly that. If we need to envision our response to climate crisis, there are people who can do exactly that. And if we need to obtain a new dual fuel burner for one of our boilers, it turns out there are people who can do exactly that. If we need to get a room ready for people to rent, it turns out there are people who can go into that room, look at all of the boxes and pieces of furniture and figure out which ones should be donated, which ones should be put in the trash, and where the other things should be stored. And then there are also people who can pick out the right color of carpet. And there are even people who will put up a ladder up to the 2nd story outside our building on Chestnut Street and stand on top of that ladder and wash the windows. That is a deep bench. And if you need to welcome a new minister in the midst of a pandemic, well, it turns out there are people who will get her office fixed up, and there are people who will figure out how to pay her pension. There are people who will patiently explain and re-explain Presbyterian polity. And there are people who will greet her parents by name on Zoom worship every single Sunday. There are people who will sit down and talk in the sun in the church parking lot. There are people who will sit in the shade of their back deck and talk. There are people who will come over to her house and sit on the stoop and talk. There are people who will laugh with her and people who will commiserate with her. And there are people who write notes of encouragement and thanks that seem to appear out of the blue in her mailbox. There are people who just for no reason at all send encouraging text messages. And there are even people who gift the pastor with a cast iron Dutch oven that, as I speak, is on my stove and simmering something good for lunch. I have been well welcomed by our deep bench, and I am so grateful. I'm so grateful. It is good to be with you. And that's my report.
That is a hard act to follow. Thank you, Pastor, for that. That really made everyone, I think, feel included and excited. I'm going to hand this over to Forrest and to Kelly to walk through financials. Could we get Forrest screen control, please?
There I am. Okay. All right. I'm supposed to give everybody a report on the status of the finances last year. If you look in the packet of materials that was distributed by email, there's somewhere around page 26 or 7, there's like a 3 or 4 page report on what the expenses were and income last year, the finances. I don't expect anybody to get anything out of that unless you're looking for a specific number. So I've got the unenviable job of trying to let people understand in pictures what's really going on with our finances. I'm going to start with the expenses from last year. The first slide I'm showing here, can everybody see that slide? I'm not getting any feedback on that.
Okay, so we're not seeing your slide, but you should be able to screen
co-host
share.
him.
There we go.
Him.
How's that? Hang on.
There you go.
Yeah, but that's you're not seeing the PowerPoint slide.
Screen share your PowerPoint.
Right.
So if you, Forrest, at the bottom of the Zoom screen, you'll see the thing that says screen share.
I know. I tried that. All I get is this. Hang on.
You have to pick a different screen.
Forrest, can you see a screen that says share my screen?
How about that one?
There we go.
There we go.
There you go.
All right. Okay. All right.
Takes a village.
Takes a village. Right. Yes. Okay. Anyway, so I'm going to start with the, as I said, there's a huge table in your annual report of like 3 or 4 pages long. It's a big, all numbers. It's also incomprehensible probably to most people. So here's a picture of a pie chart of our expenses for last year. On the left is what we hoped the budget would be a year ago. And on the right is what it actually turned out to be for just the expenses. For one thing, the total expenses was down from what we expected. And if you look at the individual pieces of the pie, you'll see that most of the individual pieces of the pie are also down. The biggest portion was the building expenses. That's primarily because Glenda's position was not replaced. The biggest decrease in percentage, of course, is worship, because we were not doing it in the building, but we're only doing it online. But there are small expense reductions in just about everything in the entire pie chart. The next slide I have here is how does it compare with the income we actually we had. Again, on the left is the 2020 budget income as we thought it was going to be a year ago. And on the right is the actual income as it turned out. Now, one big thing about the budgeted income is that this was before all the expenses were started to come in. And when it became clear that the expenses were a lot less than we originally projected, we compensated for that in the income side of it by reducing the endowment draw from 300,000 to 240,000. So this pie chart shows the budget after that reduction. The pledges figure is not only the pledge income we were hoping to get for the current year, but also holdovers from prior years for people catching up. And then there's a parking lot and the plate. The plate is kind of it's not a very good description of what that one is. Yes, it's basically the cash or checks that the cash that comes in at Sunday services, which of course dropped to zero during the year. But it's also the donations from those people who choose to donate to the church without making a pledge in advance. So that it seems high, but that's real. And then there's a very small slice of other things like building use and miscellaneous and other things, which are very small parts of the budget. Now on the right is what we actually did. The endowment, we actually got the full 240,000 draw that we adjusted that to in the mid-year. The remainder of that 6,900. That's the very small portion that goes to various of the dedicated funds, which it's a very small portion. The pledges, it looks like it's we missed our pledge target, but that's normal. We always miss it, so that's that 159,000 out of 170. That's pretty average. So I'm not worried about that at all. The next division, parking lot, and on after that, the plate. Those were certainly impacted by the medical crisis with COVID this year, and we saw quite a reduction in that. And then we come to the very small slice of the budget, and if you look on the actual income, that's quite a bit bigger. The biggest portion of that was miscellaneous, and that is because we obtained a Paycheck Protection Program loan from the federal government. Technically, it's a loan, but we do not expect to pay it back. And we're in the process now of filing the paperwork for ensuring that we don't have to pay it back. But they're making it difficult on us. The process for doing so is very difficult. And then the building use was also increased, primarily because the New York State Council of Churches is now renting facilities from us. And the final smallest portion of other, that's basically some of the dedicated funds that are no longer active. And there was the remaining funds in there were moved over to supporting the operating budget. Now, the next slide I want to show you is as I said, the pledges and the parking lot and the plate all were slightly under our targets, but why were they not a lot under our target due to COVID? What we have here is the receipts we see we take in at the church for every week of the year. It's averaged a bit just to take out some of the bigger bumps. The black line is the average throughout the year, and for those who don't have a video connection, they're all between $3,000 and $4,000 per week that we take in support of the operating budget. Except in January and December. In December, a lot of people catch up or they pay ahead. Their donations. In January, a lot of people pay up, so that receipts for those in January and December are generally about double what they are throughout the rest of the year. The other two curves are what happened during 2020 and what happened during 2019. And the point of this slide is that those three curves are basically on top of one another. So our receipts were basically not affected much at all by the presence of COVID. And that's really good news because people kept up with their support of the church and the programs that we support. How did this happen? Well, this one is on the lower left. You'll see on a monthly basis, the receipts that we received in Sunday offerings. Of course, in 2020, that dropped to zero. But in 2019, it was generally around 115,000 per week, except in December. So the lack of those receipts on Sunday services means we missed out on like $10,000 or $15,000 per month that was not there. So how did we make it up? On the right is what people responded to in terms of the mailed receipts. You can see that those are in 2020 were almost always much higher than the 2019 offerings by mail, and the difference is about maybe about $5,000 or $10,000, which is not quite what the 10 or 15 we're missing from Sunday services. Where's the rest of it? On the upper left is what we took in online offerings. These are offerings that came in through our website. And you can see that those were increased by a factor of like 3 or 4 times what they were in the prior year. That is a huge increase, and that made up the entire difference of the lack of the Sunday service and the mails. And on the right is the actual number of transactions which are processed by our website every month. In 2019, it's pretty constant at about 10 per month. But in 2020, that increased to about 30 to 50, a huge increase. So that made up everything we needed to get. Now, my final slide here is what's happened to our long-term investments, often called the endowment fund. This is the last 5 years history, and it starts out with a large decrease, yes, but look at this last year here. After the initial hit from the onset of COVID, we've shown a steady increase in the endowment balance here, and now it's standing at the high, as high as it was like 3 years ago. And there's several reasons for that. One is better management. We're now using Merrill Lynch as our investment manager. And we also have a in-house advisory committee giving them parameters of the kinds of things we prefer to invest it in. The second reason is that we've had reasonably good market conditions after the onset of COVID. The third is that we're drawing less from our endowment in support of our operating budget. Our draw is the lowest it's been in 23 years, and that's really good news. And finally, during 2020, we had the benefit of quite a sizable bequest from a number of people, totaling nearly $500,000. About half of that was invested so far in this long-term investment fund, and the others are reserved for long overdue maintenance like the rose windows, State Street doors, the boiler repairs, and the parking lot. So that's what I have to report, and if you have any questions, I can listen to them.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I think it's amazing that you've done a really great job of this and reporting this, and I'm impressed. This is Mary Green, and I really appreciate that because it's hopeful for all of us. to know that we can continue to maintain Westminster and its programming and its people.
Okay, thank you.
Forrest, it's Paul and Margaret. Can you tell us who the bequests were from?
Yes. The first one was Marjorie Ketchum. That came in several pieces, but totaled about $244,000. The next one was Chet Birch, another $200,000. The last one this year was John Kinham. That was $50,000. And then we had a small portion from Julie Mader early in the year of about $5,000.
Wow.
Thank you.
That's impressive.
If anyone, just so you know, if you have questions, feel free to unmute and ask, or you can also put them in the chat. I'm monitoring the chat, and or you could, there's a hand raise function as well. Forrest, the compliments are just rolling in for you. We so appreciate how transparent and understandable you always make our finances. Not only is it encouraging to see that we're doing well in a tough time, it's encouraging to see such transparency and a willingness for everyone to understand where we stand.
Thank you.
Kelly, do you want to speak to anything around the finances as well?
Sure, I can walk everyone through the 21 budget. Thank you, Forrest.
Okay.
Can you give me screen share ability?
Yeah, sorry,
please?
Kelly, I'll do that right now. You got it? Can you do it?
That should do it. Can you see? 21 budget. Can somebody confirm?
I can see it.
You can see it. Okay, great.
Got you loud and clear.
So the 21 budget, as you probably have read and heard many times at this point, the cornerstone of which was the stewardship drive. So we had a huge goal of 203,000, which we met. So thank you so much for that. But we basically built the 21 budget around that figure and what we could afford for the coming year. And secondly, as Forrest mentioned, the endowment draw has dropped to a sustainable level of 6% now. So that's really fantastic. And with the other sources of income that we have, including a $15,326 carryover for prior year, which basically means that some of the reserve that we have in the checking account we're going to use for a total budget of $435,000. So just to highlight some of the expenses that roll up to that, we'll be going through the pastor term to call shortly. But I did want to point out our basic witness support here is directly tied to the number of active members that we have. So there was a huge effort again this year to go through roles review. You can read about that. So we have that set again for this year at the proper number. I think we're just under 200,000 or 200 at this point members. In addition, I wanted to highlight the trustees were able to reduce our building insurance costs by $13,000 by moving to a new carrier. So that was great work. And lastly, under mission, I wanted to highlight that for focus, in addition to what we're spending in the operating budget, we'll be pulling $5,000 from the session discretionary fund. So that fund specifically supports mission work. And so the total amount that we gave last year will be provided just from two sources this year. All staff did receive a 1% COLA, and that allowed us to ultimately build in just a small contingency here. And from a mission giving perspective, if you look at income Excluding the endowment, we are at 14%. So the details of this are also in the annual report. And if you have questions, we can hopefully answer them now for you. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Callie. And thanks for all the hard work you've done this year. A quick check-in from clerk. My report is in there, but I again wanted to thank Sue Shell, who this is my first full year being clerk after Sue's guidance, and Heather and Jennifer in the office really helped us all learn how to do this together. And I wanted to go through the necrology for this year. I'm going to share my screen. This is also within the annual report itself. You can see it. Deaths this year were Cindy Fowle, John B. Kinham, Robert Frost Jr. Baptisms were Melody Selena Newell and Choice L. Ashburn. And our new members this year were Joe Hart, Emily Hart, Mary Billis, and Kathy Walter. And we are grateful for the lives that ceased this past year, but were vibrant members of our church. We're grateful for the baptisms, and we're grateful for the new members, and all these people whose names I have just read have contributed to our church family and community. Do any of the other committee leaders or church staff or anyone want to speak to their part of the annual report or anything they would like to ask questions about or share? No questions would be really unique, but maybe there aren't any.
Leah?
Yes.
Can you hear me? As Carolyn? Yes.
I can,
my
Carolyn.
Question is it possible to get a hard copy of the report
by
coming to church or being mailed or?
Yeah, we could do either of those things. Go ahead, Heather.
Yeah, I was just going to say we would be happy to mail you and to mail anyone a hard copy if that would be helpful. Of course, you can also print it out from the PDF version that you'll see on the church's website. And if you're having trouble locating that, we can also just email you the PDF for you to print out. But again, happy to print it out here and mail it to you if that works best for you.
Any other questions?
I should add, if you would like to have a copy printed and mailed to you, please just send an email to Jennifer in the office and she'll take care of it.
One note I want to make, because we just haven't covered it in the meeting, but as one of the parents of the church, I want to thank Belinda and Heather for all they've done to keep the youth connected this year. My son is doing remote learning and the isolation has been tough, and weekly Sunday school and getting to be in the pageant and the children's times have been really a connection for him with the church. So I want to thank both of you for all your work that you've done with that. So if that is everything on the annual report, I'm going to quickly move to my other hat.
Oh, wait a second, Leah. I think Margaret Kahn had her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Margaret. Thanks, Heather.
I'm just not sure this belongs here at all, but I simply wanted to reiterate a comment I put in the chat this morning for those who might not have seen it. After that wonderful interview Heather did with John Fox, it occurred to me that it would be fun if a bunch of us sent Valentine cards to him, care of the church, and just that might make him smile. Something simple to do.
That's a great idea. Is that something you could take the lead on helping us coordinate?
Well, and I'm not sure it needs any coordination other than just tell people the name is John Fox, send a Valentine card to the church office. And I assume then that Heather can maybe gather them up and facilitate giving them to John.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, I'll be already giving him my own Valentine, but yes, we'll, I'd love to have a little box of Valentines to give him. And I'd be happy to sort of reiterate that and say another reminder about that next Sunday if anybody feels so inclined. Thank you for that suggestion, Margaret.
Sure.
So I'm going to move at this point to the other hat I wear, which is the chair of the nominating committee. We had a really fun year as the nominating committee this year. Thanks a lot to Tom McFeeder's creativity and thinking about what we could do beyond just chasing people around and bothering them to be on committees. So I want to thank the nominating committee for a lot of hard work this year, and we got our boards filled. And now it is time for a changing of the guard. So the slate we will be presenting for next year's nominating committee is going to be Lisa Petter, Ned Trudeau, David Norman, Carolyn Smith, Tom McFeeders, and there will be a sitting elder appointed to that, but we haven't quite worked out who that'll be. It might be me, it might be someone else, but we already will have a past elder on the committee. So that is our slate. And you should have gotten voting instructions, and the slide will be shared again at the end of this for all the items we're voting on today, but the slate's name will be in the SurveyMonkey link. I'm just going to read the names one more time. It's going to be Lisa Petter, Ned Trudeau, David Norman, Carolyn Smith, Tom McFeeders. And I want to again thank the nominating committee for an exceptionally good year that we had. And I want to thank all the members that were very enthusiastic about helping this year. It was the excitement about having a new pastor and moving in a new direction was prevalent when we asked people to volunteer their time. So thank you to everybody. I'm not going to hand this over to my, I call him my X-Wing fighter because he always supports everything I do. And that's Larry Volk, with some of the excellent work he does himself. And he's going to go over the terms of call for Pastor Heather.
Thank you, Leah.
And I think I'm supposed to leave, right?
Please.
Okay.
Sorry, so awkward. Please leave. I'll text you when you can come back.
And Kelly, would it be possible for you to share on the screen again the numbers that you had with regard to the pastor's salary and fringes?
Sure.
There really has been little change from what the congregation approved last year when Heather was called as to what her compensation and benefits would be. But I did want to just go through them with you so that you know what they are. We, as Kelly had mentioned, for 2021, we have implemented a 1% cost of living increase for all employees, and that included the pastor. And in addition to that, you may recall that in Heather's terms of call for 2020, we had a provision which gave her an additional 4 Sundays off in recognition of the fact and to facilitate her work down at the Coxsackie Correctional Facility and the series of weekend programs that she has historically done there. And not surprisingly, that has not happened in the last 3 quarters of 2020, and it is unlikely to happen soon. And so what we have done instead is that we increased Heather's compensation by $1,000, which is roughly speaking what we would spend for supply pastors for those 4 Sundays in anticipation of her not taking them off. Beyond those 2 pieces, the changes in her salary and benefits were largely formulaic in that the medical allowance for her, as required by Presbytery, is 25% of her total effective salary, and her pension contribution is 12% of total effective salary. Her Social Security allowance is also formulaic, and it ends up at $5,300. Continuing education is $2,000. The expense allowance of $1,500. All told, the salary and fringes are $85,573. And I would be happy to answer any questions that anyone has. Hearing none, I would pass it back to you, Leah.
Excellent. I'm just texting Heather to ask her to get back on so she can close us in prayer. And I'm going to vamp for a second while we wait for her.
Do you want to explain the voting, Leah?
Oh, that's a great idea. If Kim, can you put up the slide of the voting instructions for me, please?
Yes, give me a second.
yes, I'm sorry. Well, you know, and in the meantime, I'll tell you the voting instructions. A SurveyMonkey link was emailed around this week. I think it's also available on the website, but
it is.
Kim is going to cut and paste it into the, how about Kim cut and paste the link into the chat? That might be easier. You can go there and vote till this afternoon. Also, if you are not a computer person, you are welcome to call the church office and register your vote. You're going to be voting on two things: A, to accept the terms of call, and B, to accept the slate of the nominating committee. Though I think it's in reverse order. We would ask that members only vote. And if you're dying to vote, then you should talk to us, because we'd be happy to make you a member to vote the next time around.
Oh, you just have to make me a co-host so that I can share my screen, please.
Yeah, sure. 1 second. And then the one thing I was going to say too was for households with more than one person, more than one voting person, you can either use two different devices to vote, such as like your phone and your computer, or you can just write both in the names field that you're voting for two people. And I can't make you a host, Kim. I don't know why it won't let me. Maybe Heather, if you're back on, if you're the host, you can make Kim a host.
I'm back on, but I'm not hosting.
Co-host. Yep, just make me co-host.
Heather, you are the host. You can make her.
I am the host.
Yes.
Sorry, Kim.
Anyway, if you're more than one person, go ahead and just say in your phone message, the three of us are voting 3 votes, or say where you fill in your name. If you have 2 different votes, then you have to use 2 different devices. But if you're both voting the same, you can just put both names in the member column and I'll count you as 2.
I like that, Leah. If you're more than one person, I
myself and many people.
I know, we all have many faces.
But so. You can use your phone, or if you have both, like as Paul pointing out, if you have Safari and Chrome on your computer, you could use 2 different browsers. There's a couple of different ways to get around it. Just please don't vote twice for your same self. So now, Heather, you're gonna close us in prayer, unless anyone else has questions or things they want to say.
Speak now. All right, well, Kim, would you mind if I took over the screen sharing? I know this is like everybody wants the screen these days, but I was just thinking, you know, Westminster has so much going for it, but it is missing at least one thing. And I have yet to encounter a Westminster Presbyterian Church of Albany theme song. Now, maybe that does exist and I haven't seen it yet. There are people in our congregation who are very good composers and lyricists. So this is only, I'm just, you know, desperate times. I had to make it up myself, but I really would encourage anybody who feels ready for a Westminster theme song, or if there is one that has been written, yes, thank you, Nate. Victor would be a good one for this, but any and all submissions would be welcome, and we will sing together all Westminster Presbyterian Church theme songs at a future congregational meeting, I'm sure. But this is the best I could come up with on short notice. And I could not convince Al to sing it. So you got me, folks, unless somebody else feels particularly tuneful at the moment. I'm not really known as a choral leader, but this one is to a familiar hymn, Glorious Things of Thee Are Spoken. Al would know what the official tune name is for that one, but I also know it as the German national anthem. Everybody know this one? Anybody gonna sing it better than I am? Volunteers? Okay, here it goes. Please mute yourself and sing along with me. Underneath the soaring steeple in the heart of Albany, here we pray and here we learn and listen. Here we find community.
Here we live with common purpose. Here we sing to God on high.
If you want to join in with
us, just show up. We won't ask you why.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, Gail, I should have had you start from the beginning. We'll make a more proper recording of that in the future, unless somebody comes up with a better version, which I do welcome. We have it all except for, now we even have a theme song. Go in peace. Thank you for being a community that can laugh and cry and sing and shout together. God bless our year.
Thanks, everybody.
Are we good to go?
Good to go. The Survey Monkey is in the chat here, so cut and paste it if you have to be able to find it otherwise. Thanks, everybody.
I know.
Bye.
Next week's
Bye, Frankie.
Bye.